3, 2, 1.
Good morning. Please silence all electronic devices for the duration of the meeting. Welcome to the March 18, 2024 Joint Strategic Planning and External Relations and the Revenue Alternatives Ad Hoc Committee meeting. I am Councilmember Gil Schussler, Chair of the Revenue Alternatives Ad Hoc Committee meeting. Melanie Williams, Chair of the Strategic Planning and External Relations Committee, is also present. The meeting format is hybrid. A quorum is physically present at the HART Administrative Offices, 1201 East 7th Avenue, Florida Conference Room. The rest of the board members are participating via communication media technology. Please look at the screens of your devices, and if possible, an image of the flag is displayed, and if possible, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Do we need roll call?
I've taken attendance, and you do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Okay. Next on the agenda is public comment. There's no one scheduled to speak. Is there anyone present for the public comment meeting for this morning's meeting? Appearing to be none, we'll move forward. This concludes the public input section of the meeting. In the packet are the minutes from the October 23rd, 2023, November 17th, 2023, and February 29th, 2024, Revenue Alternatives Ad Hoc Committee meetings, and the February 19th, 2024 Strategic Planning and External Relations Committee meeting. If these minutes are acceptable, is there a motion to approve all sets of minutes?
Second.
And we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. Next on the agenda is a presentation by Mr. Mark DeLegal. I hope I didn't butcher that too bad. Member of the HART Legislative Support Team on a wrap-up of the state legislative session, which just recently ended. Mr. DeLegal is joining us remotely today. You are recognized, sir.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for allowing me to make a presentation. The slide deck has been shown, and we can move to the first slide or past the initial slide. We'll go get right into it. So the primary focus of your legislative team in Tallahassee this past year was try to secure some monies for the construction or rebuilding of the heavy maintenance facility. And we identified the surtax revenue was somewhere around $570 million of collected dollars. Then there's been an interest accumulation on that. And we went to the legislature with your staff, with Mr. Drainville, also with a couple of board members, and made visits and petitions throughout the process, including the governor's office, the House, and the Senate leadership. I regret to tell you that we were not allocated any of those dollars for purposes of the constructing and rebuilding the heavy maintenance facility. But I did want to briefly tell you what did happen with those dollars. It's been reported in the newspaper, so I won't go into intimate detail unless you really would like to dig deep on it. So $256 million and change is going to be used to resurface roads in Hillsborough County. The Florida Department of Transportation will contract with the county to manage that. A list of projects is going to have to be prepared and then approved through what's called the Legislative Budget Commission of Tallahassee, and then that process will proceed. In addition, the legislature put $171 million aside for a refund of claims. So if you're somebody who paid the sales tax and you can justify and demonstrate that you, in fact, are entitled to a refund, there's going to be a process established. Now, the process is going to be overseen by the courts, and there's going to be a claims administrator appointed by the court, Leon County Circuit Court, where this would take place. There's some dollars available also to reimburse the attorneys who pursued the litigation. as well as public notice that will need to be occur for purposes of letting people know about the refund. Any unused monies of that $171 million would be pushed over into what I call relief program. So that is beginning. By the way, all the claims are required to be filed by the end of this calendar year, and then beginning in January, there's going to be a surtax holiday, or a temporary sales tax suspension is what it's officially called, and any unspent monies from the refund bucket, as well as some of the interest that has been earned, as well as $162 million will be available for a temporary sales tax suspension. That is essentially the summary. I make one other note here. The whole process that has been outlined for Hillsborough County has been put into permanent Florida statute. So in the event that this ever were to happen again in any other county or in Hillsborough County, this process of spending the money on road resurfacing and a claims process and a sales tax relief process will be embedded in statute, so that it would be spelled out. So I want to point that out. Any questions on that process?
Any questions by any members of the committee? I do have one. I'm a little fuzzy on the permanent sales tax relief process. What does that mean specifically?
So the way the statute is set up, it's contained in what we call in Tallahassee the tax package. Every year there is a bill that has got tax relief in it and other elements to tax. It's Bill 7073, and it sets forth a process that says, if you were to open it up and read it, it literally reads about like I'm about to tell you. In the event that a county charges a sales tax surtax that is thereafter declared unconstitutional by court final jurisdiction through all the appellate process, then it goes on to spell out how the monies are going to be spent. So essentially what has been done here is the plaintiffs have embedded into permanent statute a process for any other county in the state who attempts to have a sales tax like this that is subsequently declared unconstitutional. It will be handled in the exact same way as the HART process.
So it won't.
I can only assume that was part of settlement discussions with the plaintiffs.
So it won't preclude any other new sales tax initiatives. It'll just prevent everything from burning in purgatory then.
That's a good way of looking at it. So if it won't prevent it, if there is an unconstitutional tax, there will be process already in place to deal with.
Okay. Now, going back to the discussions with the legislators and so forth, was there any feel or any handle on as to why there was a specific exclusion of HART in the allocation of these monies, given the fact that the original referendum included about 45% of the total for HART, but to the benefit of HART in itself? Any feel as to why HART was excluded specifically?
Yeah, there was resistance to providing HART funding this legislative session, even through the surtax revenue or line item in the state budget, due to the inconsistent and past 5-year agency leadership. I will say that Mr. Drainville has been very well received, and underscore the word very, by the leading senator, Collins, and by Representative McClure. And both of them have been indicating, and others as well, that if things continue to progress as they appear to be, that they believe the agency will be worthy of funding investment in the future. And they tell us they're committed to it, but essentially there's been not enough time that has passed between some of the things that had gone on in the last 5 years and now.
Well, thank you very much for the information. That's very, very good to know. I appreciate that. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, Mark, it's John King. Just one quick question. The $170 million that's been earmarked for legal fees and costs and refund claims, is there any way to cap the legal fees at a certain amount so it doesn't get siphoned off?
You know, I'm not exactly sure how the court is going to administer that pot of money, and I am not sure it's not spelled out in the legislation what the legal fees are going to be. You can't tell from reading what is passed. It's just in the $171 million bucket are legal fees and costs, refund of claims, public notice. So presumably there is going to be a petition filed in by the attorneys where they will seek compensation to work.
All right, but there's no provision for capping those legal fees at a predetermined percentage or a dollar amount.
Not in the legislation, sir. There is not. I'm a little outside of my comfort zone, but I would tell you that generally, as a lawyer, that the court's going to look at the number of hours expended and a reasonable hourly rate and come up with an amount that is compensating these attorneys.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Mark.
There'll be a process justifying that.
Good morning, Mark. This is Director Hartfield.
Right. Yes, sir.
There's approximately $162 million set aside for sales tax relief. Is that for all 67 counties or the one county for which that money was collected from?
100% in Hillsborough County, sir.
Okay.
And it may actually be more. So if the if the claim refund process doesn't expend all $171 million, plus there's an interest. If you look on the slide, there's about $19.5 million of interest that will also be available for the sales tax relief process.
Okay.
Mark, one other question. Just
Just
John
in
King
terms
again.
of,
Go ahead, Mark.
I just was going to give you another way of looking at it. 45% of the money is going to road projects, and then about 30% of the money is going for claim refund, assuming it all goes out that way, and then about 25% is for sales tax holiday process.
Okay. Mark, my other question would be, out of the $170 million, assuming that does not all go for refunds, is there any possibility that we might be in line for an apportionate share of whatever the remainder is for the heavy maintenance facility?
Sadly, sir, no. I scoured that myself, hoping for that to be an answer, but there's a reversion of the unspent amount to sales tax relief.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? Well, thank you, appearing to be none. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for your efforts on behalf of HART during this last legislative session. We do appreciate it. Oh, I'm sorry.
There's a couple other
Oh.
slides that I can run through. If
Please. No, go ahead,
Time
continue.
permits?
I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so there was a big bill, which we call the DOT package, and it contained a number of provisions this year that impacted the public transit system throughout the state of Florida. So number one, and rather than me repeat all of what's on the slide deck, number one, there is a limit that any Tier 1 transit agency, which we are, can have administrative costs that are no greater than 20% of the statewide average. I think that's something we'll be able to easily accomplish. We're a very lean operation. Number two, I call it the transparency provision. all budgeted salaries of leadership. And this is kind of funny, so I pointed out, if anybody at HART accepts a gift in exchange for a contract, you got to report that. Probably nobody in the state of Florida will be reporting such a thing, but it does say that. This has to be posted on the agency's website. No agency in the state can increase their administrative costs by more than 5% in any given year. And we're ready for the next slide. There was a provision that passed in the 2023 session that prohibited government and private industry from having masks and certain vaccine mandates. And there was language that was put in the bill that says if a transit agency were to have such an illegal mask or vaccine mandate, they would not receive state funds. That is nothing new. You wouldn't be violating state law knowingly anyway. If there's going to be an effort to repurpose lanes of traffic for public transit, required supermajority vote. If we're taking eminent domain for public transit purposes, that has to be discussed at a public meeting. I'm sure you would normally anyway. There was a lot of discussion around advertising and bus wraps, and probably a lot of urban myth and concern that some buses and transit agencies were being wrapped with public service announcements or political announcements that weren't consistent with the views of some elected officials in Tallahassee. So essentially what came down is you can't use FDOT money. So if you get money from FDOT, you're limited on wrapping your buses only with essentially your logo or the name or like emblem of the local government. This does not affect or will not diminish your ability to sell advertisement on wraps or use other monies that are not state monies to wrap for, say, just make a Black History Month or something like that. And then the last thing is just an associated thing that, there are laws in Florida about how dark cars can tint their windows. There was a provision in that bill deal with that that said the buses have to comply with the tint rules of a regular vehicle. So again, we've talked to the staff about this, and I think and I'll let Mr. Drainville and Lena and others speak, but I think we're all comfortable that all of these provisions are not going to disrupt our operations. Then the next slide is another couple of bills I just wanted to make note of. First of all, in another transportation bill, there's language that says that FDOT cannot commit more than 20% of the fuel tax or the motor vehicle license fees for public transit. Now, this one could give you pause, but in talking with your staff, FDOT monies are well below 20% of those fuel tax and motor vehicle license, somewhere in the 10%. So it's not something that would impact us. That's the belief of staff and also our trade association. And then the last thing I wanted to mention to you on bills that passed, because somebody asked something about this, and I don't know if it's a member of this group or not, and it got a lot of publicity about public camping bills and whether or not our bus stops, or say we had a little bus pavilion, which is somewhat enclosed for purposes of getting people getting up out of the weather, would the language on unauthorized public camping and public sleeping impact us? Interestingly, the answer is no, because that bill only applies to cities and it only applies to counties, and you are neither. So it's good news. You will not have to be dealing with that question and have to debate whether it applies or doesn't apply, or how it applies, I guess is a better answer. Flip over to the next slide. These are bills that we tracked and monitored, and were very active in some of them, particularly the first one. So sovereign immunity, Florida law provides that governmental entities have sovereign immunity unless there's a raising of a limit by the state legislature, and then people can, if they're injured, they can pursue what's called a claim bill in Tallahassee. The current limits in Florida are 200, 300, which means 200 per person and 300 per incident. If there's 2 or 3 people per or a bunch of people on a bus, $300,000. If there's a desire for further compensation, if you have insurance, you can settle within the limit of insurance, or you can pursue a claim bill. An annual effort is undertaken by the trial bar to raise these numbers, and then there are other parts of the current law that the lawyers attempt to adjust to change the dynamics of a tort claim against a sovereign entity. The long story short is this bill will be back next year, but this bill did not pass. Essentially, it got watered down by the Sovereign Coalition, which includes your likely suspects of cities, counties, school boards, public hospitals, etc., us. The plaintiffs' bar did not get what they were looking for in this bill with the numbers and the process. So they ended up what's called killing your own bill, and so they just dropped it. There was another provision that that troubled a lot of local governments that we followed carefully. Said if there was a surtax referendum or surtax levied, it had to be renewed every 10 years. And as you can imagine, a lot of these surtaxes are bonded all over the state, and that would have been very disruptive, particularly people who had already bonded it. So that did not pass. There was a bill governing or attempting to govern Pinellas Transit System. It did not pass. And then finally, there was a bill that would have required us to accept cash payment. We think it would have applied to us and would have prohibited charging fees for accepting cash, and that bill did not pass either. And then the final thing I wanted to bring up is our next steps. So we've already begun to outline our plans for the summer to continue to pursue state support. So a couple things of note here. So Representative McClure from East Tampa, he is going to be the chairman of the Appropriations Committee in the Florida House, which means he's going to be extremely powerful. And the news of another Tampa Bay area legislator, Senator Hooper, will be the chairman of the Appropriations Committee in the Senate. Well, he doesn't include Hillsborough County. He's part of the community, and we're going to work with both of those gentlemen in the off-season, as well as some other legislators who are key and who have been very willing to help us. So Representative Coster from Hillsborough County put in a request for us. Senator Burgess has been very receptive to us and the team, and Mr. Drainville. And Senator Collins, I can't say enough about how supportive he has been. And he's very well regarded, and he's a freshman senator, but he's really growing and becoming quite an operator in this process. Not all new people to politics master it so quickly, and he has done so. Senator Roussan, of course, is a veteran, and he's very supportive of what we're doing as well. So we're going to continue to work with those folks, and we're going to have one or all of them, hopefully all of them, join us at the heavy maintenance facility. We're also, Scott and staff has already said we want to have a little bit more structured process for developing agency priorities. So we will begin in earnest probably July, August, coming up with a list of agency priorities, which will then run through this committee and be approved by the board, and then presented to the Hillsborough County delegation when they meet and hear from different local government agencies. So that's our plan as we're going forward, and any direction or improvement on that would be great to hear from you. The legislative team is ready to give you what you want from this point of process and how we go about securing support for HART in Tallahassee. And that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions. I cannot hear if someone's talking.
I'm sorry. Thank you. There doesn't appear to be any questions for the committee members. I did want to say thank you. This has been a very effective report, best one I think we've seen yet, and at least during my tenure from our representatives up in Tallahassee and so forth. So thank you for your efforts, and we'll look forward to the next steps and securing the additional funding whenever possible, as well as getting the good work done by the administration, the staff of HART, out to everybody, public and the legislatures all up and down the pike. So thank you very much, and we do appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, that's moving forward. Next on the agenda is a committee action item for review by the committee for recommendation on approval by the full board of directors. First is item 5A, which is a returning item for another review by the committee prior to the vote by the full board. This is an amendment to the staff recommendation to the HART Board of Directors to approve the MOU between HART and PSTA for collaboration opportunities. Mr. Drainville, you're recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee members. So this proposed amendment removes the functional area government relations from the proposed MOU. As a follow-up and in response to the comments by Commissioner Wasswell at the February 5th board meeting, that he wasn't supportive of the efforts regarding fair and planning, but unsupportive of the lobbying efforts married together. So staff proposes removing the functional area government relations from the proposed MOU. HART and PSTA do have separate contracts and priority legislative services. Both HART and PSTA are members of the Florida Public Transportation Association with a mission statement to continuously support public transportation and improve mobility opportunities in Florida through advocacy, education, innovation, and partnerships, and to avoid creation of the misconception of the joint legislative efforts. Staff recommends removing the functional area, government relations, from the proposed MOU. So Section 2 of the MOU will now read as follows. HART and PSTA will look for opportunities to collaborate in such areas, including but not limited to bus maintenance, purchasing, innovative mobility solutions, human resources, information technology, fair payment systems, customer service and communication issues, and executive and administrative oversight. That concludes it. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Drainville. Any committee members have any questions regarding this? Appearing to be none. Sorry. Is there a motion to recommend to the HART Board of Directors approve item 5A and advance it to the full HART Board at the next regular board meeting?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you. Motion passes. Discussion item. This will be a follow-up to the February 29, 2024 Revenue Alternatives Ad Hoc Committee discussion. Next on the agenda, discussion item presented by Ms. Julia Mandel, HART General Counsel. Ms. Mandel, you are recognized. I thought I said, there you are.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to just take a moment to let everybody know where we are in the discussions, because not all of you are on the committee. This is a joint committee of the Strategic Planning and Ad Hoc Committee, so I thought it would be valuable for me to go ahead and just take a step back and identify the items that we, as your general counsel, were asked to look at. The first, and again, I go back to the premise behind the ad hoc committee is to discuss opportunities for increasing revenue and other revenue sources for HART as we continue to try and find ways to fund our agency and our activities. So in looking at that, some of the conversations that we were having in that committee included the raising of the ad valorem tax, looking at alternatives such as CRA and impact fee types of revenue sources, and also looking at opportunities for bonding and other items. I think probably the most important and prevailing item relates to ad valorem. Currently, under your charter, there is an allowability to have issued an ad valorem tax of 0.5 mils. That is within your charter, and that is the total amount that you have right now in terms of ad valorem revenue that comes to this agency. The state law allows you to go up to 3 mils. But in order for you to actually achieve that, there would have to be a two-step process. The first step of that process would require an amendment to your charter to go from the 0.5 to whatever amount would be determined to be appropriate. The second part of that process would then include a referendum to actually achieve that amount up to whatever you set in your charter. So like I said, it's a two-step process. For the purposes of amending your charter, which would be the first step, what that would take and what that would have to be discussed and analyzed is an action by the board to, and this is for any charter amendment, but specifically for this charter amendment, to actually change your charter from the allowability of the special ad valorem tax of 0.5 mils to another number up to 3.0 mils. So that would be an action of the board that you would take to amend the charter. Then that action would have to be ratified by all of the jurisdictions which make up HART. And that would include the City of Tampa, the City of Temple Terrace, and Hillsborough County. All three jurisdictions would have to approve that charter change in order for that change to go into effect. And as I've said, this would be a change, as we were discussing as it related to revenue, a change to your charter to change the cap on your millage. The second part of that process would then be to actually have a referendum, which would go forward to allow for the vote of the electorate for the purposes of charging the ad valorem, as it were, for that increase to occur. And that action would take an action of your board and actions of all three jurisdictions to place that referendum on the ballot. That has to be a ballot that goes per state law on a general election, so you can't do a special election. There has to be already a general election that is occurring, and would then ultimately take a majority vote of the electorate to approve that increase. So that is generally the process. Now, in order for this to occur in any kind of close amount of time, we are looking at a general election in 2024. And so we're really kind of getting to the end stage of that being an opportunity, given the fact, and I don't mean the charter amendment, I mean just to actually have the referendum. So we really are getting to the end stages of that, and that would take some work. And if that's something that you all want to discuss or the board wants to discuss, we can have that discussion as you all see fit. However, the idea of you just changing your charter, either now or at some point in the future, for the purposes to allow that increase in ad valorem is something that you don't have a time bar on specifically. You can take that up as a committee, you could take that up and make a recommendation to the board. The board can discuss it, and then it would go out to the jurisdictions for that just change to your charter approval. So it can be done in two steps. I think we had been discussing this really as kind of happening concurrently, but there is no legal obligation that those two items happen concurrently. You can change the charter, you can have that go into effect, and never seek to increase the ad valorem, or seek to increase the ad valorem at some point in the future through that process. So that was one of the items that was a significant part of the discussion. Another part of this discussion that I have heard has come up, and I don't know how much in the weeds it happened at the last ad valorem, but I think is worth just bringing up for everybody's understanding, is whether or not your charter as it reads today or state law would allow an opportunity for different jurisdictions, say, for example, the City of Tampa, to allow that increase in ad valorem, but it wouldn't be in effect in other parts of the jurisdiction. Say, you wouldn't have it necessarily in Temple Terrace, or you wouldn't necessarily have it within Hillsborough County, but that increase in millage could occur only for residents of the City of Tampa. And I just use that as an example, more because I'm spent a lot of time in the City of Tampa than any other reason. But I think that is something that we would need to spend a little more time on. And the reason I say that is the way the language is written today in your charter, it's not the clearest language in the world. I mean, I think I know what it says, other people may disagree, but I think before any legal opinion is given on that, it would be important for us to first say, for example, there's an action to look at this further in the city of Tampa, to allow us to go talk to the city attorney's office and gauge their thought process. And of course, if there is a jurisdiction that this is occurring in, we'd always want to have, you would have to have the approval of that jurisdiction to proceed forward. In addition, something that I would probably recommend is it related to that particular issue is the seeking of specialized outside legal counsel. Although Gray Robinson does have public finance attorneys within its law firm, this is a very, very, very specialized area. There's only a couple law firms in the state that really handle these very nuanced and somewhat complicated areas of the law. So if that is something, say, there was an action out of this joint committee to take to the board to proceed forward to review, that is probably the first step would be, let's talk to the jurisdiction that is the jurisdiction of interest, talk to their attorneys, and then secondarily, after that point, maybe seek an outside legal opinion unless we find some comfort among us that that's unnecessary. But I did want to at least bring that up as part of the thought process and the discussion which was occurring at the ad hoc committee, as well as something we can continue to look at in terms of raising revenue. I know there's been a lot of discussion about the CRAs and opportunities to use CRA money for very limited transit services, as well as other opportunities such as impact fees. And I actually was very involved in the City of Tampa impact fee issue many years ago in terms of financial assistance to HART, and that's something that I think has changed over time. Those opportunities can exist in very limited forms. Specifically, the CRAs might have opportunities depending on each CRA plan for the purposes of funding, something like a circulator or something like that. Very discrete items, but it would have to be very discrete, as CRA money has to be spent within the CRA boundaries. You can go a little bit outside the boundary of the CRA. My recollection is it's a mile, but it is something that has to be wholly contained really within that CRA in order to be funded. And impact fees have some additional limitations in terms of the way the impact fee structures were set up. I know that the City of Tampa did include a transit component when they redid their multimodal, so that does give them the legal authority to give that money, to have that money spent on transit, and whether it's through us or their own transit systems, that is, kind of more of a policy decision point, but it does exist, and that might be a continuing opportunity for discussion. I don't know if Hillsborough counties went that far. I haven't researched that. I'm presuming it did because at the time they were changing over from transportation impact fees to multimodal fees. There was a component that was allowed to be added per state law for the purposes of including transit or other kinds of transportation systems that are not just simply roads. But those conversations certainly, if that's the direction of you and then the board, we can continue to have with each one of the jurisdictions. I don't know what Temple Terrace has done with their impact fees or the multimodal fees, but that's something we can continue to look at. So those are just the general items that we've been talking about. Those are the things that we have been looking at. And I think if this is something that you as a joint committee would like to see move forward to the full board, we can discuss that and take appropriate action to at least bring that up to the board to see how they would like to move forward. I'm available for any questions.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Just for the edification of some of the newer board members that are sitting in the committee today, I think it's important to recognize the fact that, let's say we talked about the ad valorem increase, okay? You go from 50 cents to 75, 0.5 to 0.75, or even to 1.0 mils. What the millage generate? 70 million, 72 million? If we went a half a point So, in other words, we went from .5 to .75, be about $36 million. Now, that would all be earmarked theoretically, well, would be earmarked for capital projects, which then would increase our leverage ability on that from $1 to $3 each. So you're potentially turning 36 million, correct me if I'm wrong, 36 million into 120 million, or in that range, okay? So this is probably the biggest bang for our buck, or the biggest bang for our effort in increasing the availability of funding. Can't do it for operations, but we can use it for capital.
Clarification. That is operating or capital.
Okay, but do either one? Okay.
Correct. Just to clarify, the CIT is only
Oh,
a
for
capital
Okay, all right. But
funding.
would the CIT monies be leverageable also for federal matching?
If made available to HART,
Okay.
yes, it would be a source of capital
Okay.
matching money.
All right, okay.
For the
So I
purposes of the
stand
ad
corrected.
valorem, it could be used for capital or operations. And it also could be matched by the feds in a variety of different ways.
Even,
It's in the nature of a general revenue source versus a specified revenue source, which the CIT would be specified.
okay, but even the ad valorem is leverageable for operating? Or would that be just dollar for dollar then?
It really varies, but
Okay.
it would, assuming it would lead to an increased level of service, we would probably get more formula funding
Okay,
because
all
of ridership and that sort of thing. But for specific grant purposes, it could be used for a capital grant
Okay.
or, say, a state operating grant
Okay.
for a short-term service-related item.
I mean, initially, we'd like to get back to pre-COVID levels, and then ultimately get back to pre-Mission Max levels, if we could, at some point in time. And that requires drivers, buses, routes, increased frequencies, and that all costs money. I think the latest guesstimate was somewhere between $20 to $22 million to get us back to pre-COVID. And then, Guy, any clue, any guesstimate on pre-Mission Max?
I can have that for you.
No, that's all right. No, it's just, I don't expect that. That's something we would need for a board meeting. So I think what we need to do is we need to come to grips within our committee as to, we all know the steps now. We have to get the charter amended. Then that's got to get blessed by all three entities, and that could be difficult in and of itself. I don't personally think we can get it on the ballot or any kind of referendum for 2024, but if we can at least get the groundwork set and do a road show for the three entities, that we can move forward with it and possibly get it on the 2026 ballot for a referendum. But it's going to take some arm twisting, and it's going to take some convincing, I'm afraid, for us to get that far for a referendum. But we need to do something. We can't maintain status quo. We're never going to grow. We don't have any other widgets we can increase revenues with. So we need to do everything we can to support the administration, and it starts here. It starts with us initiating to the board on, what's the board meeting? April 1?
April 1st.
Oh, great. On April 1st, let's change our charter. Let's give us the room and the opportunity to do what we need to do, and to take HART back to where we were and then forward to the next level. We're never going to get there if we don't start. So your comments, your thoughts. I'm sorry, just go ahead. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I'll weigh in and say that we have to do something. I mean, the current status of where we are today and where we need to be, I mean, the purpose of this committee is to come up with ideas and recommendations on how do we move ourselves forward. And we've come up with ideas, recommendations, and they're not going to be easy. And if they were easy, we would have done them already. So we know they're going to be difficult, and that is the purpose of us being here today and this committee. So I think that we have to put something on the table, and we have to move forward to get back to what the public needs, and that is pre-COVID status, and then also moving forward to pre-Mission Max, go back to Mission Max as well, and at a speed faster than we can probably deliver. But part of that is going to be the education and communication and tying that in with our marketing aspects of, wraps and so forth, of how we do this and why we are doing this. And if there are other ideas and recommendations that can come up as a result of this, we welcome them all, and we're not limited. We just want to make sure that we are moving HART forward and in a way that will get us where we want, where the community is asking us to get to. So, thank you.
Thank you. John, yes, Mr. King?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick questions. The current half mil that we currently have as ad valorem, that income stream is primarily consumed with what, operating cost?
Yes, if I
Okay.
could, yeah, so 67% of our revenue is from the ad valorem.
Okay.
Goes for operating.
And currently, because of the increasing revenue base from property taxes, that half mil is generating more money now than it has been in the past, correct?
Yes, every year we have, in the last few years, we had a percentage, last year was an 11% increase.
Okay. And so any increase that we pass now or in the near future, that would go towards specific capital improvement projects, or would it go into operating costs?
No, this would go into operating. So just to put it in perspective, we FY '24, we utilized our remaining CARISA or CARES Act money. So it's $18 million. We're starting off FY '25 in the hole. So we have to figure out where that 18 million is coming from. And then I could say, when you look at the study that came out, HART's operating at $100 million less than the next comparative agency. And I cut the operating budget from 114 to 108. So there's not a lot of fat to trim. We do run a modified Saturday service now. So again, we're starting off FY '25 with an $18 million deficit, not to include the 2 CBAs that expire in September.
All right, thank you, sir. I don't disagree that in order to grow that we have to, expand our revenue base. I think that we need to take a look at how poorly the previous sales tax was received and the animosity that it generated. We need to make sure that we understand what we're asking for when we go down this path and that we're prepared to support it. Now, I think that we need to have a comprehensive plan as to how we're going to move from where we are to where we want to be in several incremental steps, one of which would be, getting funding for the heavy maintenance facility. I don't see how we can get around that at some point. I mean, we're just, finessing the edges of things until we get that in place. Once we have the heavy maintenance facility problem addressed, then we can develop, we can have a plan for growth and develop from there. But I think anything that we asked for in the way of a revenue increase from the public coffers needs to be well thought out, and it needs to be well socialized, and we need to make sure that we have at least a 50% chance of getting it approved before we ever go to the public for it. I just don't see where we do ourselves any favors if we don't at least know that we stand a good chance of getting it approved. Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with those sentiments. However, before we do anything, we have to change the charter. So
Agreed.
that'd be the very first step that we would do. That would enable us to put together a road show, if you will, for lack of a better term, to explain to the various legislative bodies the communities, as well as the setting the groundwork for the public so that they fully understand where we've been, where we need to go, and how we plan on getting there. And this will be an integral relationship or an integral effort put forth by not just staff, but it's going to require us as board members to step up and do what needs to be done for this board and this organization. These guys are out there every day putting their guts on the line. We need to do the same thing for them to show them our support and build the support within the community, within our jurisdictions. So your point's taken. Yes, Mr. Hartfield.
What's been the history of increasing or decreasing the millage rate? Has anyone know the last 20 years, what we've done with that?
I mean, one thing I can just point out, and not the history, just the timing, is the charter provision limiting it to a 0.5 mils has been in place since the 80s. So, and I don't have the history of how, if it was then adopted as the mill and never increased, or if there was incremental, but the charter has been in place for a very long time.
So with that, we're at 0.3, right?
No,
At the
0.5.
current time?
No,
or
we're
0.5.
Which is the max.
Okay, so we are, I misunderstood, I thought we were at 0.3,
We're
but we're at
0.5.
0.5. Okay, so we're at max,
We're at max.
okay.
Well, I guess my next question would be, how much do we really need to increase this in order to have the revenue stream that will allow us to go forward with the plans that we know we need to undertake?
We definitely would have to do some,
Yeah.
some homework on that. I could say PSTA right now is at 0.75.
Yeah. I mean, my
Do you think that's
thoughts,
sufficient?
No, I don't think it's for the long term. I
Okay.
think we really got to look at what our needs are for the long term.
the plan at this point would be, as we develop the referendum language, or as we develop the charter change language, those, it's not going to happen in one meeting by any stretch of imagination. And that's where staff is going to have to come back and say, okay, this is what happens at a quarter mil, a half a mil, or what, whatever. We definitely wouldn't try to get to 3 mils. That would be suicide. But if we come back with a what if at a 1 mil cap, or could we build the language into the charter review to make it a little easier?
In terms of the process?
Not necessarily the process, but the cap.
I mean, you can change the cap up to whatever the statutory limit is in your charter, but you don't have to go up to the cap. It's just that's part of the chart. That's why it's a two-step process.
Right.
So I want to make sure I'm very clear, and anybody listening to this is very clear. It's a two-step process. One is changing the charter. Changing the charter in and of itself does not increase the actual mill which property owners are taking. And I'm saying that as much for y'all as anybody else who's listening.
Right.
That's the first step. The second step would be to go through a process of a referendum, which, does require all of the jurisdiction to approve the referendum, as well as, obviously, the vote of the electorate. So what you put in the charter is important for the purposes of whatever you put in here. It would be what you're maxed at for the ultimate, any ultimate referendum. So you can make the max higher in your charter and never go there. That's really, I think, a policy question for y'all of what you'd feel comfortable with, what the board would feel comfortable with, and then also what the other jurisdictions would feel comfortable with, because keeping in mind that they all have to agree to it. So that is the first step. The second step is obviously the part of the referendum, which that is an entirely different process.
Yeah, I think that the difficult part of this is the balancing game of, we're walking on thin ice as far as, well, do we go for 1 mil or 2 mils or whatever be the, by going too low, we handicap future boards. By going too high, we kneecap ourselves in the process. We don't get out of a chair. We don't get out the door. So that's something that we need to rely a little bit more on staff and so forth to say, okay, this is what happens at a half a mil, this is what happens at three-quarters, this is what happens at a mil increase, this type of thing, what the availability is. I think it's important to know what it would take to get back to pre-mission max, if that's possible. So that might be one of the scenarios that we have ready for the board, even if it's at a 30,000-foot level. We're not going to get into the minutia, hopefully, at that point, because we just don't know. We take an economic downturn and property values tank, then, we're no better off than we were to begin with. But hopefully that doesn't occur, and everything will be a little more profitable for all the entities relying upon ad valorem. And in the meantime, we can be looking, deeper discussions or have a better handle. In the meantime, we need to also, I believe, explore the variability of the different jurisdictions. Can Tampa do it, or can Temple Terrace do it, and not unincorporated Hillsborough County? I think that needs to be part and parcel of the discussion with the board to get that information and be able to make a rational decision on doing that. Yes?
Just the answer to the Mr. and Max question. So right now, we're at about 75% of our pre-COVID service.
Right.
So say we got to 100, we would still need another 20% service hours across the board to get to pre-mission max. So
Mission Max happened when, 16, 15?
17, 18.
17, 18? Okay, so, and back then, we were at, what, 20-minute frequencies or half-hour frequencies?
That's a complicated answer, but
Yeah.
we cut several routes completely.
Completely.
Yeah,
Well, I
including
think-
express routes and local service.
Yeah, to me, it's a little disheartening to talk to other transit agencies. What's your frequency? We're an hour. That's, how can we support our customers and tell our public that, well, if you missed it by 2 minutes, you got another 58 minutes to wait for the next one. So that's, we're trying to provide a Class A service to our public and to our citizens. We need to get there. We need to do it. So, anybody else?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
Dave
sir. Hey,
McCann
David,
here.
how you doing? Good morning.
May I speak?
Please, you're recognized.
May I
I'm
speak?
sorry. You're recognized.
Thank you. I just really wanted to echo something. I think, Mr. Chairman, you mentioned earlier that there's no way we're going to sort through all of this in time for a referendum in 2024. And in fact, I think in the past, when we have realized that we were up against deadlines, I think we as a community have rushed into some proposals, if you will, that weren't fully vetted and fully thought through. And I think this time around, in light of our recent failures, we need to be very deliberate and cautious about looking at the options. We toss around these options as if they're interchangeable, and they're not at all. An increase in ad valorem tax has a much greater impact on our citizens than a sales tax, for an example. And so my only point here is to suggest that we move forward in a very deliberate way, but look at each and every option and make sure we understand what the implications are for each of these options and try and arrive at a conclusion that has the best chance for success. I mean, I may be stating the obvious here, but I don't think we followed that particular pattern in the past, and it might be a good place for us to start now. So that's all I have to say.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you very much, David. That's a very valid point, and, I mean, we may appear to be trying to move this thing quickly, but I don't believe 2024 is reasonable for any kind of referendum issues. We need to your point, we need to do this correctly. We need to do this with much thought and make the presentations to the proper jurisdictions with that forethought being very evident. But my only concern is we're not going to get started till we take our first step. So, and I think that first step is to bring it to the board April 1st and get the authorization, if we will, if necessary, to look at the variable jurisdiction potentials, and then start to work on the actual charter language. So, Mr. Hartfield, you had a comment?
I'd like to add that as much energy as we put into maybe coming up with a solution that includes a increase in ad valorem, that we put that same amount of energy into looking at how do we reduce that. Once we arrive at a place where we're maximizing efficiencies and productivity, then our next 5 moves should be intentionally thinking about how do we get that number back down. That I would want to see that as an integral part of what we do moving forward.
Well, can I ask you a question to your point? And I understand what you're saying, that we have to be good stewards of the public money. But when was the last time you saw a car price come down or anything of that nature? I mean, we have, how many employees do we have? 800 employees. Gas keeps going up, the electricity keeps going up, insurance keeps going, my God, insurance is just killer with some of our operations. I mean, we pay with the streetcar, I mean, just for 2 intersections, the insurance rates are almost $500,000 a year, like $400,000 a year, just for 2 cross sections with CSX. I mean, I understand what you're saying, and it sounds great, but I've been in accounting all my career, and I don't know how that happens when everything else gets up, it keeps increasing. You can't tell the unions, no, you can't have any more money, and we can't tell the diesel fuel and the CNG and everything else. It's all well and good, and we can talk about it, but I wouldn't hold much hope for it.
It's important. I think I'm on the other side of the accounting, so I was the business owner. So
Yeah.
What I understood and what I think is strategic for us as we help facilitate and run this business is that we think not for what this solution may look like next year or next 2 years. We have to think forward what our next 5 moves are going to be.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
And I think an integral part of that is being conscious of this investment, and then how do we get back to and show good faith for the public that we're managing this thing correctly.
Agreed. And I think that's incumbent upon the current administrative staff that, we've had a year of no chaos, okay, to speak of. There's always stuff going on, but with the current administration, I think that they understand it, and I think they're living it each and every day. And I know it's become a lot easier working with everybody, and I appreciate the administration with what they've done. And I've seen Ms. Kirk beat the bushes for saving everywhere she can, and everybody else that's involved with it. So your point's taken, and I know that that's at worst it's a subliminal motivator for them to squeeze every penny till it screams. So that point taken. So I realize that we're probably over our hour. Is it the will of the committee? Well, we just lost 2 members. They'll be back in a moment. But I'd like to move this forward to the full board. Do we need to do this, and what's the procedural?
Since this is a joint committee, you'll need taken action of the joint committee.
Okay.
And you do have a physical quorum present, so
Okay.
it will just be a majority of votes.
Well, I'll give them a second to return, and then we'll just, so that their voices
Chair,
are
I
heard.
would just like to add that, if we're going to do this, we need to do it in a very, very constructive and very deliberate manner. And we need to recognize that we're only going to have the opportunity to do this probably just once,
Yeah, agreed,
okay?
agreed.
And maybe if I can perhaps understand what we're going to move forward on and make comment about that before you take an action, so that it's clear. It's my understanding from the discussion that we've been having that the request moving forward that may or may not occur per motion is to have a discussion item at the full board regarding the change to the charter on the cap on the millage.
Correct. That's the initial discussion.
Thank you.
And at that point, it can morph into wherever we
Where-
need to go in order to make everybody comfortable with the intention of the ad hoc committee and what they've researched and what they've come up with.
And I put that out there so that it's very clear, because I know that we want to make sure that there's a discussion, but that is simply a discussion on the change to the charter, if that's what we're moving forward with, so that it's, again, very clear for the purposes of this meeting and for a meeting in front of the Board of Directors.
Very good, thank you. Okay. Mr. Knight, any questions? Okay. Ms. Williams will be back in, she's on the phone. Okay. Entertain a motion to move this discussion for a referendum, excuse me, move this discussion for a charter change to the full Board of Directors on the April 1st meeting for discussion and action by the full board. Entertain a motion to that effect. Do we have a second?
For the purposes of discussion, yes, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Appearing to be none. All in favor of moving this item forward, moving the charter review concept to the full board, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
David? Any opposed? Appearing to be none, motion passes. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, is there any old business to be discussed by the committee? Appearing to be none. Any new business? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. Now, can we move directly into the next meeting, or?